our next panelists, who are going to talk about the legislative agenda. And I'm going to be introducing Paul Schmidt and Bridget Alexander. And they both have a very unique and appropriate combination of experience and life experience to bring us in position, both direct contact with agriculture and legislative and policy experience that bring us a great perspective. Representative Schmidt represents the town of Westport, which I think we could argue is the epicenter of agriculture, certainly in this region and probably maybe in the state.
No argument about that.
No argument. And also represents parts of Fall River, New Bedford, and Freetown, so he has an urban agriculture perspective as well. He is vice chair of the Joint Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture. He's introduced a number of bills, I assume it might be touching on that this morning, that are relevant to this topic. He's a former selectman in the town of Westport and lives on the most beautiful farm in the region, I think without question, although I'm sure some might argue that. But walks the walk. She is executive director of CMAP, which is the Southeastern Mass Agricultural Partnership. She's a member of the Massachusetts Bar, but in a storyline that almost seems like made up. She split her time growing up between a dairy farm in Montana and Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., which I think is a great combination.
Well, I'll just start off by saying it's a real pleasure to be here this morning, particularly amongst so many friends. You folks have really been at the forefront of local foods, both as producers and also as advocates and facilitators. And of course, there's been no more effective advocate than CMAP. So it's a real pleasure to be here with Bridget. I have kind of a radical thought picking up on what you said about the effects of climate change and people possibly moving east rather than moving west. My thought is that as water becomes scarcer and more expensive in the Central Valley and in the Imperial Valley of California, valleys of California, and in the Southwest, I think that the growing of foods may gradually shift back to the east. And I think that locally grown foods are going to become not just something that we want to have, but I think they'll be a must-have. I can sort of see that in the future. And I am, here in Massachusetts, I think we're so fortunate to have Commissioner Watson at our helm. And it's a great pleasure working with you. I'm here wearing two hats. One is as a producer, as a farmer, and the other is as a legislator. As a farmer, my family has had a beef cattle herd for about 50 years. My dad bought a wonderful group of animals, Angus, from the Y plantation on the eastern shore of Maryland about 50 years ago. And they were at that time one of the premier breeders of Angus cattle. And of course, like many at that time, they were grass-fed. And my dad kept the herd as grass-fed, and he never shifted over the way so much of the industry shifted to corn. And for many years, people kind of laughed at him. And as a matter of fact, we almost had to give our meat away because people said, gee, there's something funny about this meat. It doesn't taste right. There's no fat in it. What are you doing? And it has been remarkable over the last 10 years how tastes have matured or reverted, and the demand for grass-fed beef has really made a terrific difference to our farm. So we have continued to raise our animals exclusively on grass. My dad actually used to finish them on grain, but about 10 years ago we said, the heck with this, let's just do straight grass. And so it takes us longer to get to maturity. It takes us about 30 months, just short of 30 months, to get an animal to maturity on grass. As you know, on corn, you can do that in 18 months. But I think you've also heard that there are concomitant issues for the animal's health that arise from force-feeding corn. And so a growing number of people really prize the fact that grass-fed animals are being raised the way they always have been. So we use rotational grazing. We shifted to that about 10 years ago also, and that really made a difference. As you know, rotational grazing means that you pasture your animals in small cells, and periodically, every 1, 2, or 3 days, for us it's every 3 days, every 3 days you move them and to a new cell. And that way there's always fresh grass ahead of the animals. And I really think it makes a difference in the quality of beef. Also, by doing that, you're spreading the manure around. And we were talking about concentrating on the quality of soil rather than other methods of improving our agriculture. And we don't use any artificial fertilizer at all. Just the movement of the animals around the fields, the manure, and the hoof prints, which kind of dig into the soil a little bit, which gets the manure down into the soil and gets the air into the soil and improves the quality of the soil, has really helped. So I guess we're kind of old style, but it seems to work very well. We're just one of a growing number of meat producers. And you know, a lot of this area used to be in dairy farming. And about 30, 40 years ago, many of the dairy people moved out to upstate New York. Thanks to the state's APR program that Greg mentioned, much of the open land in Westport and in Dartmouth has been protected forever. We put our farm under APR. That's my one hat. My other hat is as a legislator, and as Steve mentioned, I've just been, thanks to the speaker, I've just been appointed vice chair of the Joint Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture. And I got to tell you that you're absolutely right. The Department of Agriculture does not get the funding from the state that it should, that it needs, that it must. And we really need all your help in contacting your legislators. Contact me. Speak to me and my associates. And we've got to find ways of improving the support we give for the Department of Agriculture. Come back to our great partner, Bridget Alexander, CMAP.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just do a quick overview of what CMAP does if you're not familiar. It's very exciting. We're actually in our 15th year this year from when it started. Paul, who introduced the day today, was one of the first supporters at the table. And through its evolution, and we have continued to evolve into 2013. We have boiled it down to supporting local food and sustainable farming. And we approach that from the triple bottom line impacts of local food and sustainable farming, which is, we've mentioned some already, is health, so our own personal health, the environment, and the local economy. And that kind of summarizes the sustainability definition as well. And CMAP approaches its work in 3 categories: as a promoter, as an educator, and a convener. As a promoter, we saw our logo up there, the Buy Fresh, Buy Local program, and I know I saw a lot of bumper stickers when I pulled in today, which you can't tell me how excited I get when I'm driving down the road and I see one. There's one, there's one. Brought some today if you don't have one. And then also as an educator, and that really is the bulk of our work. So we do workshops all year round for the public, gardeners, eaters, however you'd like to categorize yourself, and especially farmers, providing technical assistance, trying to bring the experts down to our region that we don't necessarily have here on a regular basis. We also do that through our annual conference, the Southeastern Massachusetts Agriculture and Food Conference. We just had that Saturday, February 28th, at the Bristol Agricultural High School. So we do that every year the last Saturday, so put that on your calendar. And then we also do our experiential events. So we do a bog jog, that's going to be in its 3rd year this year, connecting local food and healthy activity. So we do a local food celebration at the completion of the event, and we've been lucky enough to get some local beer there too. So people are always like, no you don't. You don't have beer. We do. We have beer, and people drink it all very quickly at about 11 o'clock in the morning. Amazing. We also just added last year a Veggie Stampede for children, because we'd like to also put our efforts forward into the obesity issues that are facing our children today. Local food, and preparing it, and having family dinners will go a long way, not only matching with healthy activities. So we do a little obstacle course for them, and the staff, including myself, don our tomato, pea, and carrot costumes and do the Stampede ourselves, just to show everyone how it works. So that we're very excited to have that expanding this year. And one of our best resources in educating everyone on where they can find local food and what is growing in new farms, also to promote themselves for free, is the online farm guide. You can access that through our website. We work with, as you saw the map up there, there's 8 by locals, and we also work with Rhode Island to have this as a free service for farms to promote themselves and be accessible online. They do not have to have a website. They can search, find a farm, and also this is a great database. You can search organic, you can search for chickens, for breeding stock, for wood materials. So we really do run the gamut. It's a great database, and we're always expanding it and improving it. And then as a convener, we provide networking opportunities for farms and for buyers. One of the main areas we have increased that work is our farm to institution program, and we have come together with farms who and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we're expanding into, and I want to say wholesale as much as institutional sales, because we are working individually with the buyers, specific buyers, to set prices. So I feel we go a little bit better than if we were pushing people into wholesale. And this is also an additional revenue stream. We do also an annual fundraiser, which is the Farm to Table Dinner. This doesn't fit into any category necessarily, but it's an amazing event every year. We sell out. We always go a little bit past capacity because we have trouble saying no. This year it's going to be at Alderbrook Farm in Dartmouth, June 28th. Mark your calendars. Go to our website. But as we move forward, we are doing a very big survey to determine what is the best way we can impact local food and sustainable farming in our region. We have 171 responses already, and it's not a short survey. If you're not on our email list, you might not have gotten the link or the request to do it. I brought 50 surveys with me here today if you'd like to fill them out before you leave, and I would encourage you to do that if you have not. Some of the key questions, for example, are what is the level of legislative advocacy CMAP should be involved in. That has been overwhelmingly positive, that we should be more involved. We should be addressing GMO. We should be addressing raw milk. on behalf of our region. So it's incredibly important that we hear from you on what workshops we should be providing, what TA assistance we should be bringing down to our region, what experts we should get here, what workshops you want, what are the barriers to eating local food. We need to hear from you on what those are specifically so we can address them and hopefully chip away at those barriers and make it easier for you. So again, that's on the front page of our website. 171 responses already. I'd love to get to 250. And especially for farmers, we call it the Eaters and Growers survey. So it has something for everyone. It's about 5 minutes if you're just an eater, and about 10 minutes if you're both, because farmers are eaters too. So I want to get that feedback from them as well. I'm going to turn it back over to Paul, and we'll get to the legislative meat today.
Yeah, hey Bridget, I got to say that your farm-to-table dinner, to me, is the high point of the summer. That's a remarkable dinner, and it's great that it's going to be this year in Dartmouth in Russell's Mills at Alderbrook Farm. That's going to be a great event, and you all better buy your tickets soon because it's terrific. You were talking about advocating for agriculture. One of the biggest ways that you can support agriculture is coming to Ag Day up at the State House. This year it's April 2nd. And agriculture basically takes over the State House and really makes itself felt. You come up, people come up, knock on your legislator's door. Greg, you were right. Legislators really do listen, both in committee hearings and also when people come to our office. So mark that in your calendar.
So 13.75 acres were put into production that were sitting fallow. Yeah. This is just in 2012. So again, not only season extension, but using the land we have available. It's pretty, it's a little difficult to get drilled down to see exactly how big we can go, but if that happened in 1 year, I think our ability to feed ourselves is underestimated. And we did sell to seven schools. We did our pilot, we called this, with UMass-Dartmouth, so it's perfect that we are here today. Chartwell's is their food service provider, and they were a great partner and also expanded Southeastern Mass schools farm sales to additional schools, including Northeastern, Worcester State, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Salem State, and Mass Maritime. So again, very, very exciting.
Rehoboth is buying apples from the folks on Drift Road in Westport. It's wonderful.
It's amazing. So again, there's
Rehoboth school system. Yeah.
And I know there are other school systems that are interested in moving forward this year, as well as healthcare industry as well.
Some of the other successes last term for agriculture, where we actually got a pilot program going on the Cape to sell shell. You know what I mean, by the seashore. And secondly, we are, I believe it's true that farmers markets can sell beer, locally produced beer and wine. So, but coming up in the next term, I just got my list of bills for the Environment, Natural Resource, and Ag Committee, and there are, I think, in total about 400, but we'd like to just touch on a couple of the highlights as we see them. We have 2 federally approved slaughterhouses in Massachusetts, and they're both in the north central part of the state. There is a program in Rhode Island, which is about the same distance, but it involves slaughtering in one location, trucking the carcasses to another location where they're aged, cut, and frozen. So that's complicated. So for us down here, 2 locations, both about 2 hours away. And I think you could say there's a shortage of capacity in Massachusetts. So we have to book. I mentioned to you that we slaughter in October. We have to book slaughter time a year ahead. So it really locks us in and doesn't allow for much variability. Also, the slaughterhouse we use will only take 3 animals from one customer per week. We try to do about 15 to 18 animals a season. So we're going up and back, 6 round trips. It's very labor intensive and time intensive. And I am convinced that we could get more locally produced meats if we had a slaughterhouse down here in southeastern Massachusetts. We do have one in Bridgewater, but it's a custom. That means you can bring in your own animal and they'll cut it up for you. But every package is stamped not for sale. So you need to have a slaughterhouse that is USDA or state approved. And that is why one of the pieces of legislation that we have been working on for a couple of terms, and we're going to work on it again, is shifting the responsibility from the feds to the state.
Have a meatball. That's going to be one of the big events of the night, which I think sounds pretty fun. Yeah.
Is there anything one of you can do to kind of persuade towns to adopt the right to farm bylaw?
Thank you.
We have that on our list.
Yes. Westport has it, Dartmouth has it.
I know
Where are
towns
you
have,
from?
but I'm from Norwell, and I tried 2 years in a row to get it passed, and it was called by one of the selectmen as unnecessary legislation.
It doesn't look like Norwell has an AgCom yet, and that is the first step to typically getting your right to farm. And there is a state a statute, though, that for a right to farm. And then there's another level of work that towns do to also adopt the right to farm. So if you're here representing a municipality or would like to take it to your AgCom, just to summarize the right to farm bylaw on the town level, and actually Dartmouth was the first town to do it. It clarifies the protections afforded farmers, so they're not taken to court on nuisance lawsuits based on smells. Hog farms are particularly susceptible to this type of scrutiny, and it clarifies, not only clarifies those protections, but it also will take local regulations and make them consistent with the state statute. And then it can also play mediator on a local level, so these issues don't get to the litigious state that can be horrible and sometimes result in farms being put out of business. So please fill out the survey and let us know what workshops, when, where, how we should be providing, what your interests are, what you would attend, what you would pay to attend them.
And if anybody would like to be in direct contact with a local meat producer, here are names, addresses, and phone numbers.
Right. Thank you, everybody.